Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Eliana Kernodle. A district court in California ruled that teachers and parents in the state may try to create a statewide class action lawsuit against school districts with policies requiring them to conceal a student's gender or name change from parents. Joining me to discuss this is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, this is a case that's been litigated for a while now. What's sort of the background prior to this ruling on this case?
Yeah, that's a great question. This started in April last year, and essentially two teachers at the Escondido Union School District in California filed a lawsuit basically saying that their school district's policy on transgender student privacy violated their constitutional rights. And they basically said, look, we have students who are saying, I want to use a different pronoun, a different name at school. And then the school would send out emails saying, these students have this name at school, but do not use these pronouns with parents. Use their regular pronouns with parents so that their parents don't know. And basically that would, protect students' identities, right? So that's kind of the force of the policy. It was like, we want to try to create like a safe space for students to be able to embrace their gender identity at school without risk of maybe parents who don't, affirm their identity. But then at the same time, these teachers said, look, this violates my constitutional freedom, my First Amendment rights, because they're forcing me to lie to parents. So if a parent asked me, is my student using a different pronoun at school? They would have to say, they'd have to lie. And that was sort of the policy, is like, you may not tell parents this, even if it gets into some of this weird stuff, right? Of like, what do I tell a parent if they're directly asking me? And that kind of question. And then also these are Christian teachers, right? So Elizabeth Mirabelli, Lori Ann West, these are two teachers at Escondido Union School District. And they also cite their deeply held religious beliefs as part of this, and saying like, we're not going to lie. And, we don't agree with that kind of policy. So they basically filed a lawsuit saying, we don't go along with this. And the judge issued a preliminary injunction, last year said, these teachers have a case on its merits. They have legal standing. This will continue in court as it has been, but, they have a right to go back to their job, and you can't, have any kinds of, retaliation against them, anything like that. So that's sort of the background, basically challenging the school district's student privacy policy. And that's, been incredibly contentious in recent years, as school districts have tried to like stand in the, in between like parents rights and, those kinds of advocates, and also students, and trying to protect them and their gender identity. And they see that as like a mandated thing. And so that's a lot of, what LGBTQ plus advocates say, is that we have to protect students and, give them a space to be themselves, and schools should be that. So I think that that's kind of where school districts have found themselves, sort of in that tension. And this is just a very interesting argument from a constitutional point of view.
So then what's the latest development on this case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, as the litigation has gone forward, they have filed, they proposed a class action lawsuit, and that was allowed to continue, right? So this is the most recent thing, is that the district court ruled that they could create a class action lawsuit. And so they have to file that still, and then they have to get like a certified class. So there's like a lot of different legal hurdles here, and a lot of different kind of legal terminology, but essentially that's allowed to go forward, and that they're allowed to get to a place where they can bring in a lot of different teachers and parents who have these kinds of policies in their schools, and challenge that as a certified class. So they're hoping to do that, as the lawyers for these teachers, Mirabelli and West, they're hoping to do that soon, and basically challenge these what they call parental exclusion policies, and allow parents to be able to, get information about their children. And so one of the background of this too, and this is where it's going to get really interesting, I think, Eliana, is that there's the state of California has for a long time defended this position that students have a right to privacy at school. So that's kind of like one of the things here where I think this case really gets into like the maw of a lot of the cultural debates that we're having around like gender identity and transgender students and parental rights, right? So this kind of gets to some of those like core issues, because there's the California Department of Education has like a frequently asked questions page, which seems pretty innocuous. But on that page, they direct school districts to basically protect student privacy at all costs regarding gender identity. So if a student comes out to a teacher and says, these are my pronouns, I want you to use a different name for me, like to not tell parents about that and they cite like California anti-discrimination law and federal law. And I think that would go hand in hand with like some of the challenged Department of Education, like the Title IX rules. Like, so there's a lot of these different kinds of things in play, but the school district itself said, and then this kind of gets interesting in the legal arguments of this. The school has said that it was using those policies, like that FAQ page, as if it was a policy and pointing to the state. And I think the state has said that this does not have the force of law, right? So these like this FAQ policy does not actually have a legal like binding sort of thing. So it's just like a very interesting, like this kind of gets at the heart of what authority does the state have constitutionally to protect students' privacy if teachers have a First Amendment right not to talk about students in a way that would maybe violate their rights. So it really gets to a lot of these like kind of core issues. And it's super interesting to kind of see how this is playing out in the courts and that they got an injunction, that they do have, standing on the merits to pursue this lawsuit and continue to litigate this. It's also been, you can imagine it's been sort of difficult and a lot of upheaval for these teachers. They have a position that is quite unpopular. So there's been a lot of like pushback to West and Mirabelli. And that is one of the reasons why the court has allowed teachers who are joining the lawsuit, they don't have to use their real names or like their whole names. Like they can be known for discovery, but that won't be on the record because of different threats that Mirabelli and West have faced, like students referencing bringing a baseball bat to school or like verbal harassment, derogatory flyers, pictures. So that you can see how this has been an incredibly divisive and contentious topic, and how I think that's going to continue no matter what happens.
Well, this is a very interesting topic, something that's been very widely debated, like you've said, and it'll be very interesting to see as this case continues to make its way through the courts where it goes, and we will continue to follow it, so listeners can keep up with it at chalkboardnews.com.